Goldsmith, and today I'm going to teach you how to make these easy drawstring Easter bags. They're perfect to stuff with a few little goodies, deliver them to your family's doorstep, and still make their Easter just as special as it would have been if you spent it together. So get your scraps of fabric and let's get started. The materials that you're going to need to make this bag is to print the pattern. So it's a free link below this video. It's a PDF file that you can print from your home printer. Check the size on the scale box to make sure it's accurate. You also need some scraps of fabric. So be resourceful. You only need about 0.2 meters to make the main part of the bag and a little tiny scrap of something contrasting for the ears. If you don't have interfacing at home, that's okay. We will just double up an extra layer of the cotton that you're using for the ears to make them a little bit more stiff so they stand up. But if you do have a scrap of interfacing, that comes in handy as well. And then you would like to get some ribbon. Cording will work, about 36 inches. If you don't have ribbon at home, I'll teach you how to make a little drawstring using your cotton scrap fabric as well. So get your supplies going and we'll get started. You're going to want to go and cut out of your fabric. So you will need to have cut out 2 of the main bag so that you have a front and a back. You will need 2 of a lining. You could use the same as your outside of your bag too. I just used a contrast so you can see my lining in this video. And then you're going to want 4 of your fabric of your ears. So 2 for one ear, 2 for the other ear, and then 2 of interfacing. Now, if you don't have interfacing hanging around the house, that's okay. You can cut an extra 2 of your fabric just so it gives it a little bit more stiffness so the ears stay up. And once you've cut out, then you're going to make some markings. So just on the outside of your bag, not on your lining, there are 2 lines right here on both sides. You want to mark those on your bag so that you know when to stop and break your stitching. We want to leave this little opening on this side open and the same on the other side so that we can feed the cording or ribbon through to form our casing. So go ahead and do that. Once you've made your markings, you're going to pin down the 3 edges of your bag, the 2 sides and the bottom. We are not sewing across the top, so leave that unpinned and open. You're going to put it in your machine at 5/8 or the 15 line. You're going to backstitch, go down to that marking and backstitch. Start again after that marking, backstitch, come down, backstitch. Don't sew those L's. You're going to sew across the bottom. Don't sew that L. And again, all the way up to that marking, stopping, and then starting again for that little bit. Again, we need to leave between our notches open so that our ribbon can pop out. On our lining, we don't have to leave those openings, so you can pin down your 2 full sides and sew those. But notice on the bottom I have these double pins. I want to leave about a 3-finger gap open at the bottom so that I can flip my bag through it when I'm done my bag. It'll make more sense once we get there. So all you're going to do on this side is backstitch, go across backstitch, start again, backstitch, go across backstitch. Again, not sewing in those L's. Okay, as you can see here, I use contrast thread so my stitching lines would show up better. On my lining, I've sewn down the 2 sides, leaving an opening somewhere in the middle that spans about 3 fingers. And on my outside bag, I sewed down the 3 sides, but leaving the little bit open between my notches. So now we're going to go to the iron and fuse interfacing onto our ears. When fusing interfacing to fabric, you want to make sure no wrinkles are in your fabric first. So I'm going to go and press these nice and smooth first to get out all the creases, because if I fuse my interfacing to them, my creases would remain permanent. Okay, so I'm going to just give those a little press here, flatten them out, and then I'm going to grab my interfacing. So there is on fusible interfacing a smooth side and a bumpy side. Bumps are the glue, so you're going to put them against the fabric and put the other one. So you only have 2 pieces of interfacing. They only go to the 2 ears. You'll still have 2 ears without interfacing. If you're doing this with extra fabric, you would do the same thing as you would just layer 2 pieces of fabric together and then sew close to the edges all the way around, smaller than 5/8, so that when you attach your extra 2, you won't see that stitching line. I'm going to go ahead and press the interfacing on. So I cover my ears with just a press cloth so that I don't bubble my interfacing, and then I just hold my iron down for 10 seconds on each ear to melt the interfacing glue to the ear. So now it's time to sew the ears. So I have my 2 interfaced ears right here, and I'm going to leave them face up. And then I'm going to pin 2 of my plain cotton ears with good sides together. Again, you don't want to be looking at your good side of your fabric. And so I'm going to put those ones on top. And now I'm going to pin all the way around this edge and sewing that at 15 or 5/8 of an inch. Don't sew that short little straight side because that's how we're flipping our ear right side out. I've sewn around my ear, and before you go ahead and flip it right side out, you want to trim your ear to just less than 1/4 of an inch all the way around so it's not so bulky on the inside when we flip. I like the 5/8 seam allowance because it's easier to sew, especially around curves when you're beginning. But now we're going to just trim away some of that bulk. Once you've done that, flip them right side out, and then we'll give them a nice press. How was pressing those ears? Sometimes it's a little challenging because there's such a tight little spot to flip through. But we're going to put those aside for a second, and we're going to finish off our corners of our bag. So I'm going to take my lining, and on the L where I didn't sew, I'm going to pull apart my lining inside corners and pull it flat like this. And then if you can either put one seam allowance one way and one the other way like this. And we're going to sew across this corner. I prefer to leave my seam allowances open. So I'm going to take those, open them up, and just make sure that seam matches on the inside. And same thing, you're just going to follow 15 and sew across there. You're going to do it to all 4 corners, the same on your outside of your bag and on your lining. This is what your corner should look like after sewing. So you should have gone and done that on your lining and on your outside of your bag like so. With our outside bag, one step to make your casing a little easier is we have this opening where we left open. I've pressed my seam flat open, but we're just going to go and edge stitch just close to the edge right there, and just right there, just to hold the seam allowance down so that when we feed the ribbon through, it lays smoother, and when pulling on the drawstring, your seam allowance never starts to peek out of the little opening. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll show you right after. So this is what I just went ahead and did, just so that it holds the seam allowances a little bit flipped and can't come all the way out once we're pulling on our drawstring. You're also going to find the middle of your bag. So I just sort of put my side seams together and put a pin halfway across to mark my middle so that my ears are on sort of symmetrical. I'm going to take one of my ears and I'm going to put it with good side against there, and I'm going to give it about a 1/2 inch away from my pin. And then I'm going to take the other ear and do the same and put it a 1/2 inch away from my pin. So there's about 1 inch of gap right there. And we're going to go and sew across the tops of our ears just at the 10 line, not the 15. Because when we sew around our lining, we'll do that at the 15, and then this line never shows. So I've sewed across the top following the 10 line to secure my ears with about a 1 inch gap in between. My bag is right side out, my lining is inside out, and now I'm just going to tuck my whole outside of my bag into my lining. So I'm dropping my whole little bag into my lining, and I'm keeping my ears tucked in, so my ears are not going to be peeking out. Okay, and so now I'm going to pin my seams to match. So I'm going to line up my seams, leaving those nice and flat open again. And I will pin my other side with my seams matching, and then I'm going to pin all the way around the top circle. And I'm going to sew along the 15 or 5/8 line all the way around the circle, because we're going to flip our bag through that lovely opening that we left in the bottom down there. We have sewn around the whole top of our bag, so we're going to now go ahead and flip our bag through that opening. So you're going to kind of reach in there and start to grab your outside bag through that opening just a little bit at a time. It will come. You think that it won't fit, but it will. So we're going to flip this. And once you've flipped it, we're going to give it a press. There we go. Just takes a little bit of work and some finessing. I can tuck my lining into my bag, and now I'm just going to make sure that my lining's tucked in and give it a press all the way along that top edge. After you've pressed, our last step before we feed our drawstring through is to form the actual casing. So we're going to put it in our machine like this, and we're going to stitch following the 20 line or the 6/8 line, it's the same thing, all the way around our top edge. Make sure your ears stay out like this as you're spinning so they don't get sewn down. So you should have had your casing sewn following the 20 line all the way around. So now our tunnel is ready for us to cut our ribbon and feed it through. You're going to cut 2 pieces of ribbon or cording, or in a second I'll show you how to make your own draw cord out of fabric, but you would want to cut them to be 18 inches long each. After that, you're going to take a safety pin and feed it through your casing, starting and finishing on the same side. So I'm going to go through this tunnel, and I'm going to keep going and pass this guy, so don't go out here. And then you're going to come out the same side you started on. So I'm going to come out over here again. Your seam allowance is stitched down, but your safety pin might get caught up on there, and that's okay. You'll just wiggle it out until it comes out. So that's one side, and now you're going to do the same to the other side. So you're going to start there, wrap your way around, and come out the same way, and then knot your ends together. So I'm going to go ahead and knot these 2 ends with each other so that they can't get thrown through the casing again. So once you're done feeding your ribbon through the casing, you should have something that looks like this. Your ends are knotted, and then you can go ahead and pull it shut. And ta-da, you have your little Easter bag. We just want to sew up that little opening on our inside. So we still have that tiny little bit of lining with the opening where we flipped it through. So you can go and pin your 2 folded edges together and just edge stitch. So give it a little back stitch, go across, back stitch. No one will see it on the inside of your bag there, and then tuck it back in. And then your bag is complete, ready to deliver and make somebody's Easter. I'm going to show you how to make drawstrings out of fabric in case you can't find any ribbon or cording in your house. If you don't have ribbon or cording, we can make our own drawstring out of our fabric scraps. I've cut a piece that's 1.5 inches wide by 18 inches long, and all I'm going to do with my iron is I'm going to iron it in half first. So I'm just going to give it a nice crease in half all the way along. And then I'm going to open it up, and I'm just going to tuck my raw edge into the crease on both sides. like this and give it a press as well. So I'm kind of pressing it now into quarters. And then once you've done that the whole way, you are going to, so just to show you, we've done our middles and then we've done our raw edges to our middle, and now we're just gonna flip it together. So no raw edge shows. I have a little fold on this side and it's a skinny little piece of fabric that I can use now as my drawstring. So I'm just gonna finish it off, pressing it again. It should stay pretty creased along that original line we did first. And all you're gonna do now is put it in your machine and edge stitch close to the fold. So just like this, stitching nice and close to that fold all the way down, and then you can feed it through your casing like it would be ribbon and then knot your ends together as well. So that's an alternative if you don't have ribbon or cording. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial today and are excited to make a few of these to make somebody's Easter this Sunday. Please subscribe to my channel for more easy to make projects at home.